This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. What I'm talking about today is scary stories. I want to say tales so bad. Scary stories to tell in the dark. The Guillermo del Toro rewritten anyway, movie by André Øvredal. Øvredal, something like that. It's very Norwegian, has one of those weird O-looking letters. In any case, he did The Autopsy of Jane Doe, and that's a pretty good movie. It's on Netflix now. If you haven't seen it, check out The Autopsy of Jane Doe. It definitely gives you a feel for what, as a director, Øvredal is up to, how he approaches the subject matter. In any case, Scary Stories is pretty good. It's an anthology, but it's an interesting anthology in the sense that, if you recall Creepshow, that was an anthology. And while every story was not at all related to the central story, it had this comic book concept which wrapped around the individual stories, giving it all context. Though Scary Stories is interesting in the way it approaches the anthology, in that every individual story is relevant to the larger story itself. So that's not something you see a lot. And in fact, off the top of my head, I can't recall an anthology that does this. I'm sure they're out there. I just can't recall it. So the story revolves around Halloween in, I believe, 1963. And these four friends go to a haunted house for reasons. They're actually really good reasons for them to do it. But I'm not going to go into that here. Go see the movie. In any case, they go into the haunted house and find a book. Supposedly the book was written by someone who had killed these children. And they find that the book writes itself. There's a really great line in the movie that you don't read the book reads you, which is really evocative of a line from John Dies at the End, in which you don't take the sauce takes you, or something to that effect. Soy sauce, John Dies at the End, watch the movie, it's really good. In any case, the book writes itself based upon whatever is going on with the individuals that have taken it. And that's another interesting thing about this book, by the way. There are no sacred cows, which I really enjoy, in that you're introduced to, as I mentioned earlier, four people who discover the haunted house and within the book. And people begin to die in really interesting ways. And they're people who you probably wouldn't think would die, and in other movies probably wouldn't, because they're actually part of the core group of individuals that you're introduced to early on. So that's kind of surprising. And this is one of the funniest movies I've seen in a long time. And it's gallows humor, which so works for me. It's people responding to situations in a particularly funny fashion. There's one member of the group that responds very funny generally, but on the whole, the situations are such that people respond in fashions that are really funny to watch. And some of the funny, I thought, was very uncomfortable funny. When something in a movie is difficult for me to react to, I'll sometimes will laugh. It's not necessarily due to it being funny. Sometimes it is, but not always. It's PG-13, but some of the chills and thrills kind of, I wouldn't say push R, but they're in the ballpark. It's interesting. And it's one of those movies that makes me want to read the books that they're based on. I've never heard of the stories that inspired this movie, but now I'm genuinely curious, because when you see things happen in a movie without reading the books, you don't necessarily have context for what's going on. I mean, it makes sense and it's complete in and of itself, but you get the feeling that there's more behind it, that there's story you're missing by not having read the books. And one of the characters is disposed of in a really interesting way, and it lacks context. At least I thought it lacked context, because, as I said, I haven't read the books. I have no idea of why events happened as they did and why this creature looks as it did. But it feels to me like there's more there. There's story there that I am missing by not reading the book. I don't want to imply that I didn't get it or understand it because I haven't read the books. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that there seems to be more there. It would be a richer experience if I had read the books. I didn't. It was enjoyable. I had a good time at this movie. But nonetheless, if you've read the books that it's based upon, you're probably going to enjoy this a lot more. If you haven't, you're in for a good time too. It's just a nice, fun, enjoyable, creepy movie that anyone would enjoy. I would even let kids see this movie, in fact. It's a bit intense at times, but that's okay, because as a kid growing up, I watched intense horror movies. And that's a good thing, actually. I think it gets kids' brains thinking, it scares them, and that's okay. They'll live. It's a good thing. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is pretty entertaining, lots of fun. Check it out. And by the way, what is it with people and cell phones in movie theaters? Because I was sitting next to a couple, and every 15, 20 minutes or so, they're cutting on a cell phone or an Apple Watch, which I own. But I didn't check the watch. Why? Because I'm watching a movie. I didn't check my cell phone. Why? Because I'm watching a movie. I could understand if you're a surgeon or you're the president and you need to have instant access to information. This is not these people. I could be wrong. I didn't ask them. But it's highly unlikely because this behavior happens a lot. And that would imply just about every other person in the movie theater is a surgeon, because it just keeps happening. And it's just the weirdest thing for me. It's like, don't answer your damn phone. It's like an hour and a half. It's 2 hours. You'll live. Don't check whatever. So that bugs me. But that being said, this is Brian of screenfiles.com and review.